Long ago, in a time forgotten, a preternatural event threw the seasons out of balance. In a land where summers can last decades and winters a lifetime, trouble is brewing. The cold is returning, and in the frozen waste to the north of Winterfell, sinister forces are massing beyond the kingdom's protective wall. To the south, the king's powers are failing, his most trusted advisor dead under mysterious circumstances, and his enemies emerging from the shadows of the throne. At the center of the conflict lie the Starks of Winterfell, a family as harsh and unyielding as the frozen land they were born to. Now Lord Eddard Stark is reluctantly summoned to serve as the king's new hand, an appointment that threatens to sunder not only his family, but the kingdom itself. Welcome one, welcome all to today's video, which is me finally talking about Game of Thrones because I finally finished reading it. I feel like it took me forever, and really honestly it did. I started Game of Thrones May 18th and finished it July 20th, which is quite some time, but I do want to say that this is the longest book I have read thus far on my reading journey. I started reading last year. Obviously I've read throughout my life, but if you're new here, I started reading last year more seriously, I guess, and making it a prioritized hobby. So today's video is going to be a non-spoiler video of Game of Thrones, and I will be also posting a spoiler video, a spoiler talk. I would love to have a conversation with everybody about Game of Thrones if you have read it, and let me know if you have read it in this video, or if you haven't, and why you haven't, or why you did decide to read it and everything, because I feel like it took a lot of convincing for me to actually decide to read Game of Thrones. So, firstly, this book is gigantic, and I just want to put for reference, like, I care about word counts. I don't care about page numbers, because page numbers don't tell me anything. For example, this brick of a book right here, called Malice by John Gwynne, is 672 pages. The word count of that book is 210,000 words. Now, if we go over to the hardcover version of A Game of Thrones, it is 694 pages, being like a 20-something, odd page count difference. 22, right? I don't know how to do math. Don't quote me on that, okay? Game of Thrones is 292,727 words, approximately. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're telling me it can be a 20-page difference, however, it's almost 100,000 word difference, I don't give a crap about page numbers. I care about word counts. Okay, that's really just a tangent onto, like, me giving myself some credit, because this is the longest book I've ever read, and it did take me quite some time. Much longer than I had anticipated, much longer than I wanted to, but I really wanted to try to be able to take in all the information that I could and read it at my own pace, because I feel like that is so important to talk about in today's everything, right? Because why are we forcing ourselves to read so fast? You're not even enjoying it. I digress, because you know what? We're here to talk about A Game of Thrones. Just from the jump, just from the prologue, I'm immediately asking questions. It's immediately gripping. The writing is making me feel like I'm there. It's making me feel like I can really see and picture what is going on. Just like 11% in, because I decided to take notes based on percentage, I had barely read anything and I was already emotionally scarred. Like, immediately hating characters, and then remembering that later on I'm supposed to empathize with these characters, like books and books later. And I'm just sitting here like, how? But you know what? I do believe it, because George is great at writing characters. Now, let's first start with plotting. So the plot can feel kind of slow sometimes. And I just feel like because there are so many elements, it may feel kind of slow. If you don't like politics, you may not like this book, but I feel like this book has so much more than just its politics, because I feel like it's very well rounded in everything that George talks about. For whatever reason, I'm first name basis with George now from reading the first book. There are, for when it comes to how the story is written with the plotting, there is so much information because this world is so vast and there are so many characters, which we will get to the characters in a moment, but there will be information told in a way that doesn't feel like info dumping. Like maybe an older lady that they call Nan is talking to the children about history of such and such a land, such and such a people, and maybe there's this one-off characters that come by and tell someone some stories about to be wary of and some things like that. And really, like, we as the audience are also figuring out these things at the same time as our characters. And I do really enjoy that, because a lot of the times I don't like knowing things that I feel like our characters don't know, because it can be very frustrating, which does also happen because there will be the way that this book is written. So I guess I'm going to do plot / writing. So the way that the book is written is, it is written with characters for each chapter, so different point of views. And I feel like, tell me if I'm wrong if you have read this. In each point of view, I feel like the way that George R.R. Martin writes is slightly different, because when he is writing from the POV of a young child, the narration of it almost seems to change and become a bit more youthful as well. And I don't know if that's just me or if that's just George. And it's not like the thoughts of the character, because that would make sense. Like, obviously that would be why it's younger, but it feels like the narration as a whole becomes younger. And maybe it's just because he's really trying to immerse you in like what she's thinking without being a third person perspective. I think it's almost like an omnipotent perspective, but like not. I don't know how to explain it, but do with that what you will. As confusing as that probably was, I'm sorry. I do like the way that the plot progresses, because I feel like you keep wanting more and more information out of each character chapter that you read, and then you just keep changing perspectives where, you know, you get to find out this side of the story, and then this side of the story, and then this side of the story. And it doesn't feel like you're having to read one space in time, jump into this person's life and read their space of time. It doesn't feel, it feels like everything flows. It feels very nice. And so while I say that it may feel slow, it's because I've never read something this big with this many characters, because there are just hundreds of characters that I'm going to meet. Next, let's go on to the characters. And basically, if you haven't noticed, I do like this book, but let's continue. So I feel like from the jump, the characters just feel so real. So it really makes you care for the characters. Now, I'm not sitting here sobbing over these characters, depending on like what their situation is, but I'm still feeling for them. My heart is still dropping when something happens that's very serious in their life, or something that's going to affect their brothers and sisters, or it's going to affect the people they care about, because I feel like I care about them. Now, it doesn't feel as real as like someone sitting next to me, and that's when my empathy will really get in, right? But like I have a hard time like being to the point of like I'm going to cry during a book, so I definitely didn't. But there were times where I'm on the edge of my seat, as they say. You know, I'm stressed. I'm like literally like reading the book like that. It's just, I didn't realize I just blew into the mic. Whoops. So there is character growth. There is characters like receding. Each character feels very much their own. And I feel like that is so important when you're writing a book. And especially if you're going to have 100 freaking characters or more. I mean, even if you're gonna have freaking 10 characters, you're going to get bored if everyone feels one note. If the characters just feel like they're there for the plot. And that is not at all what you get with George R.R. Martin. I feel like you get like a story that George R.R. Martin really wanted to be told. And that is something that I feel like, I'm gonna tangent, something that I feel like writing has gone off on nowadays, where people are like, oh well, I just care about this trope and this trope, so I'm just gonna throw this in my book, and you know, I want my book to do well. So George R.R. Martin, trope wasn't even a word when he was making these books, and he just cared about getting this story out. And I feel like that is so cool, for you to be so creative, for you to be able to be like, yeah, these characters, they're real enough, and their story needs to be told. And I don't know. I just, get very amazed by the creativity of writers, and just maybe because like my last 2 brain cells have been fighting for the past couple days to just survive. But there is so much information that has to unfold. Now, I would say that I recommend taking notes. I did for the first like 40 to 50%, and then I kind of like just got into it and was like, okay, I'm just gonna remember what happens, basically. So those were things that I liked about the book. And I want to talk about some things that I kind of felt okay about, some things I felt meh about, and then some things that I just really did not like. And I will say, I do understand that this is written as a different time period. However, let's get into my most frustrating and the thing that I was worried about the most, which is SA, which is assault of a certain nature. So personally, it's something that's going to bother me a lot. I don't think it was meant to be comfortable for you to read. Like, none of it was comfortable, and George was not romanticizing it either, and I think that's very important. It's kind of like showing how terrible these times were, but I also feel like you don't have to show man or a people's domination over people by assaulting them. I don't feel like that, and I just feel like it was kind of overused in his book. It wasn't always overly descriptive, but there were times where it was quite descriptive, and you can skim over these things. And I think that makes me a bit more comfortable, that you can skim over these things. And it's the same thing with just the scenes of a certain intimate nature that I'm not very comfortable reading. It makes me very uncomfortable. I don't like it. I try to skim over it, and he does make it to where you can skim over it because there's not exactly important information that is said, and I just skim to look for the important information, and that's it. But when you think about the age gaps and you think about the way that George describes women's breasts, it makes me very uncomfortable, and it makes me kind of angry because I'm thinking, like, this man at the time, I don't know, 40, 50 years old, he's like 70 now, I think. Older man writing about a 13-year-old's supple breast that her brother twists to show a power dynamic, and it was almost sensual. And this is not even the incestual couple that there is, and that obviously would make most people uncomfortable. It definitely makes me uncomfortable because there are intimate scenes described with brother and sister. I don't like that. If we're talking time period, if we're talking all this, yes, it happened. Yes, it was more normal for royal families to want to keep the bloodline pure. I don't like that. I don't. And to backtrack and talk about, George R.R. Martin really likes to talk about women's breasts. Almost every time a female is introduced, that is what he's talking about. Almost every time. Including, like, not our main 2 female young characters, if I can remember correctly, but even like 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. Why are you describing their body parts like that? And it's not even as a, oh, he perceived this in this way. It's not even his characters perceiving this. It's just him narrating it. Like, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. That's nasty to me. And I know that he's not the only fantasy author that does that. I know that he's not the only author that does that within any scope of fiction or nonfiction. I know that that's a thing that happens, but it just icks me out because I'm thinking about George R.R. Martin now as a 70-year-old man writing about a 13-year-old's breast. It just makes me so uncomfortable. Like, I am just not okay with that. And just a lot of the ways that and like, the thing is, he also talks about men's body parts too. So it's not like it's only women. And I'm aware of that. That also makes me uncomfortable because I don't want to know. I don't want to know what's under the pants, okay? I don't care. I didn't ask. And, man. I will say though, those things are the big things I didn't like. Now, the little things that I didn't like was like sometimes the prose was like more descriptive, sometimes it was less descriptive. And so I'm like, I don't know where to place this, because sometimes he's like, oh, they had the golden chalice, and as they drank, then the cool water went down the mouth of the person and went into their guts and something, I don't know, just being more descriptive. He smelled the cherry wine in the air with the dust mixed and then it's just like, oh yeah, he drank some water. Yeah. And it's and it just kind of confused me, because I was like, so what kind of prose does George R.R. Martin really have? Because I'm confused. I am. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy it, because I feel like if you don't always want flowery prose, there's none of it. None of it is extremely flowery. None of it is purple prose. None of it is Patrick Rothfuss. None of it even gets to the level of like Lord of the Rings descriptive, which can be an upside for people, can be a downside for others. So that just is what it is. It wasn't exactly poetic. However, he did have a lot of quotes that I thought were really well spoken from his characters, who were just well spoken. And I was like, and maybe that's part of the reason why his prose wasn't super flowery, because would it really stick out if his characters said a quote, said something that was really meaningful in a very well said way, if he's always saying things well? I'm just saying that. I was just thinking about that. So, all in all, I ended up giving this book a 4.75 stars. I read it all on Kindle. The e-version, I almost bought the book today because I was thinking about it, will not lie. But the copy at Barnes & Noble's all... someone dropped it, so it was all messed up. Anyway, so I really just wanted to pop in and say my thoughts, as I just finished this book a day ago, and I really did enjoy it, and it was a big surprise for me that I did enjoy it. That is to the level of almost being a 5-star. Now, I cannot look past some things to make it a 5-star. Those things just bother me too much, to the point where I can let it go as I'm reading, but looking back, it's like, okay, well, I can't rate it a 5-star if I am so bothered by thinking about an older man writing about very young women in a derogatory almost way of a sexual nature. It just makes me very uncomfortable, and I don't think it's okay. And, there are ways around it, I feel like, but I just don't think that he was going around it. I think he just had no filter and was just like, here you go. Take it, publishers, take it. Anyway, so I am very happily surprised that I enjoyed this book as much as I did, and I know that it is a staple within the fantasy genre, and also it is one of the more well-known because it has its own show, because it's having a spin-off show, House of the Dragon, based on books that take place previous to a Game of Thrones. And so I do not plan on watching the show, by the way, because if I can't handle reading this stuff, I'm definitely not going to be able to handle watching it. So don't ask me to watch it, because I'm not going to. I don't want to. Okay? I'm standing my ground on that too. I don't want to. I'm good. I may look at the pictures of the characters for reference, but that's it. I'm good other than that. Yeah, happily surprised. Let me know if you have read a Game of Thrones, how you feel about it, if you watched the show. I would say if you want to do a spoiler comment, just do spoiler, enter, and then type out your spoiler comment. That way someone has to type read more so that they don't have to spoil themselves. And I will be posting a video, hopefully my next video, maybe the one after that, but I'm trying to do 2 videos this week and change my video schedule to posting to Mondays anyway. But I am trying to make it to where I will also be posting my full spoiler conversation. Maybe if you guys want me to do a live stream and you guys want to actively talk with me, I think that would also be very cool. I don't know, because that's something that I've looked forward to as I'm doing this YouTube channel and want to be able to create community. I really want to be able to talk to you all in real time. I think that would be awesome. So just let me know what you think about that. I am so grateful that each and every one of you came to visit today and just listen to me rant about a Game of Thrones. And if it feels like it's all over the place, I've had so much stuff going on in life right now, and I know that's not an excuse, and that I could take better notes and I could do this video a bit more well structured, because I do love structure. But man, like I said, these last 2 brain cells are fighting for dear life for me to just survive. So yes. And for reading plans, guess what book I'm trying to read next? Just guess. That's how I know you've been here the whole time. All right, I will catch y'all later. Thank you so much for being here, and God bless.